Good afternoon and welcome to this public meeting of the Standing Committee on Social Development. My name is Kieran Testart. I am the MLA for Range Lake and acting chair of the Standing Committee on Social Development. I will now ask members in the room and online to address themselves for the record, and we'll start with Ms. Morgan.
Good afternoon. As the lone other member in the room, I'm Shauna Morgan. I'm the MLA for Yellowknife North. Happy to have you here.
Thank you, Ms. Morgan, and now we'll go to Mr. Nursu.
Good afternoon. I'm George Nirsu, MLA for the Mackenzie Delta.
Ms. Whalen.
Hello. Yes, my name is Jane Whalen Armstrong. I'm MLA for Montpellier Clichy region. Thank you.
Thank you, and we also have Mr. Hawkins.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. I'm Robert Hawkins, MLA for Yellowknife Centre, not a official member on the Standing Committee of Social Development, but a member at large, and as such, always pleased to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins, and thank you for joining us and for all members of the public who tuned in today to watch our proceedings. Today, we will receive a briefing on housing as a human right from Habitat for Humanity, NWT. This briefing is part of this committee's study on how NWT legislation and policies can incorporate housing as a human right. Please note this meeting is being live streamed to the Assembly's social media channels. The chair and wait to be recognized before speaking to help us have a smooth and orderly meeting. I will now pass over to the representative from Habitat for Humanity. Please introduce yourself and commence with any briefing or any presentation you've provided. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. My name is Elena Ward, and I'm the Executive Director for Habitat for Humanity Northwest Territories. Thank you for the invitation to present here today on housing as a human right. First, I just want to give a little bit of background about Habitat for Humanity here in the Northwest Territories. Habitat for Humanity is a nonprofit affordable home ownership organization that offers a hand up to working families. It has a vision of a world where everyone has a safe, decent place to live, and we work to build strength, stability, and self-reliance by investing in home ownership. The Northwest Territories is one of 47 other Habitat affiliates across Canada. In Northwest Territories, we were established in 2013. Since that time, we've built 10 homes. 7 of those have been within the last 3 years. This is mostly due to funding that was received through the CMHC Co-Investment Fund, which is now known as the Affordable Housing Fund, topped up by the Northern Carve-Out, which was transformational for the affiliate as it enabled it to hire 2 part-time staff as opposed to being entirely run by volunteers. With this model, homeowners pay a no-interest mortgage that's geared to their income, which is a maximum 30% of their gross household income. No down payment is required. We found that the down payment is the major stumbling block for most middle-income northern families. They may have a good job, but with the high cost of living, there's just no money left at the end of the month to save for a down payment. Mortgage payments then go into a revolving fund that is held by Habitat, and this is used to reinvest in building more homes in the north. The percentage of equity that comes back to the homeowner then increases the longer they own the home. We've also found this a good motivator for people to keep their homes in good condition. You'll see here on the slide that this demonstrates where Habitat falls on the housing continuum. It's between rentals and market home ownership. It is not social or subsidized housing. It's still a home ownership model. There's 3 main criteria that all affiliates in Canada follow. Number 1 is the ability to pay. The family must be capable of making affordable mortgage payments while also paying for other costs that come with home ownership like utilities, property taxes, and maintaining the home. The next is they must be in housing need. They are currently living in housing that's unaffordable, unsafe, or not suitable for their family. In our experience, this is families that are living in crowded housing or in rental housing that's not well maintained or unsafe for their family's needs. The last one is they're willing to partner with Habitat. They must contribute 500 volunteer hours, either in helping to build their home or within the community. There's many benefits of being a Habitat homeowner. There's been studies that have been performed with people who own a home in through the Habitat model in Canada and has found that there are many benefits, such as kids do better in school, they have a higher chance of attending higher education and post-secondary, their parents often get better jobs, and homeowners are generally happier, healthier, and more financially stable. They become less dependent on social services, and homeowners are more engaged in their communities by either volunteering time, money, or both. In addition, the sense of responsibility and accomplishment creates a huge sense of pride and helps to break this cycle of poverty. Homeowners have a sense of security that they just don't get with public or rental housing. Also, because of the affordable mortgage that homeowners are paying, they're finally able to start saving money. And many of our homeowners are finally able to start putting money in savings. People aren't stressed every day about a potential rent increase or losing their housing entirely. We had one homeowner who was paying close to $3,000 a month in rent, who then had their payments cut in half because of the 30% payment cap. So Habitat wouldn't exist if there weren't barriers to home ownership in the territory. The most obvious, the high cost of living, makes it hard to save for a down payment. High purchase costs and build costs just generally translate to higher build costs. Higher debt-to-income ratios make it hard for middle-income families to qualify for traditional bank mortgages. Interest rates that continue to fluctuate, and some people feel really overwhelmed by the process and the requirements of applying for a traditional bank mortgage without support. There's also an issue of land tenure and availability, which also makes applying for a traditional bank mortgage challenging. And there's only a few market communities here in the Northwest Territories, 6 with a recognizable housing market. And I would argue it's even fewer than 6. There are some programs that the GNWT has in place to address the needs of people who are struggling to get into home ownership or who want to become homeowners. Perhaps the best well-known is the home purchase program that assists with the down payment. It provides up to 5%, and it does contain an education component, so it has the potential to be a really great program. However, there's still major barriers with this program because of the rigid bank policies in place with what you can use as a down payment, inexperienced bank lenders, the mortgage stress test, the ability to pay, and again, the credit worthiness of applicants. It also doesn't consider the huge amount of money that homeowners spend on interest over the life of the mortgage amortization. There's also the home ownership initiative for those in public housing who have the potential to purchase their home. But again, the limited supply of anything that is quality public housing stock just doesn't make this a good investment for the homeowner. There is some great things that Habitat and Housing NWT have done together over the past few years, and they have been a very strong supporter of Habitat. Back when we put an application in through the CMHC Affordable Housing Fund, they were a partner with us at that time, and they committed to provide a financial contribution for each unit over the life of that 5-year agreement, which ends in 2026. They've also been strong advocates at the federal level. Both the minister and the CEO for Housing NWT have continued to push the need for investment into home ownership programs. We've also had great discussions with housing staff about land that they own and the potential for making that available to build affordable homes. So why we're here today, housing as a human right. So housing as a human right, we think, is really about the progressive realization of housing. And the right to housing flows to you, whatever your current situation is. Affordable housing means different things to different people, depending on where they are in terms of their income and in their life. And a stronger, more equitable territory begins with ensuring access to safe, affordable housing for each individual. We believe in affordability for all, and that all levels of government and decision makers must invest across the housing continuum and increase opportunities for those living with moderate incomes to access affordable home ownership. And it's not about either or. It's rather about a prioritization and a scale of investment. Lastly, we've put together some potential policy and programming recommendations for how to increase access to home ownership. There are changes that can be made that make home ownership and housing more accessible. Addressing the needs of that segment of NWT residents who want to become homeowners should be recognized and reflected in any work to implement housing as a human right in the territory. It's all about shifting people along the housing continuum. If there's a breakdown in the continuum, that's where you get housing insecurity. We'd recommend targeted funding for northern construction and northern home ownership programs that consider the high cost of construction in the north. For example, as I mentioned, the Affordable Housing Fund was complemented by the Northern Carve-Out, and that was a complete game changer for building in the north. Also suggest making improvements or revamping entirely the GNWT home ownership program. Providing that 5% down payment may have been a good option years ago when interest rates were still 1 to 3%, but paying interest over the life of a 25-year amortization is still making someone house poor. Banks have strict rules around what can classify as a down payment, and many lenders are inexperienced with this program and they're unsure or how to administer this program in the north. We'd also encourage education of banks about this program. They're tightly regulated. All banks in Canada are extremely tightly regulated, and like I said, they can only use certain types of funding for these down payments. Would also suggest expanding partnerships with organizations that do affordable home builds, such as Habitat for Humanity. We've already had great success working with Housing NWT, and we think this partnership could be expanded to expand access to affordable home ownership. People know about the program, they understand the program, our demand is exceptionally high, and it's been proven to work. All of our homeowners have been successful. And also, Habitat can often be more nimble than a government department can be. Part of it's about scale, and Habitat has demonstrated working with individual families instead of whole segments of the population, and deliberately keeping the scale small is still a very effective way to achieve success. The GNWT making meaningful, incremental investments and policy changes to improve housing availability and affordability, including home ownership, could make a very positive, concrete difference for many NWT families. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. I appreciate your brief presentation to allow time for a committee to answer questions. So I'll turn to committee now to see if there are any questions for you. Ms. Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Ms. Ward, for that very informative presentation. I know we've been talking a lot in this committee about how we can move towards more home ownership in communities all across the territory. So this is very helpful and timely for us to see a model like Habitat. One recommendation you have that I wondered if you could give more details on, the need for more education to banks about the kinds of home ownership programs that, you know, either currently exist or that we would envision for the territory. Can you give some examples of the kinds of information that banks don't seem to have, or is it that banks need to change their policies in order to be able to cater to northern residents in needs, or that they just don't understand how policies can be applied to the north in ways that work for people? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morgan. Ms. Ward.
The issue with banks in the Northwest Territories is, well, across Canada, is they are extremely tightly regulated. They're one of the most regulated industries in the world. And in our experience, and we have an employee that used to work in banking, and so she's very familiar with this program and the issues that come up with the program. So the issue with the home ownership program and the down payment that is provided is that the banks are very prescriptive about what you can specifically use for a down payment. They need to know where the money's come from, how long that money has been in the bank, and a lot of banks don't understand the homeownership program. There's a lot of staff turnover in banks, and also as soon as a new staff member comes in, then they also need to be educated about the program. So in our experience with an employee that we had who worked for the bank, she understood the program. She worked with one bank to get that on their list of programming, but it took over a year. It has to go through a very extensive process. Then a new person comes on, they're not aware about the program, they don't understand how it can be used, and therefore what could be a very good program ends up not being used to its fullest extent because it's not a well understood program, and that potentially there could be more done through whoever administers that program to educate local banks about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. Ms. Morgan.
Okay, thanks for giving some more insights on that one. Has Habitat for Humanity built any houses or done work in non-market communities in the Northwest Territories? You mentioned that, in the NWT we have maybe 6 communities at most that would be considered to have housing markets per se. Have you done any work in communities where there is no housing market to speak of, and would you be able to, or is it, is your model of working not compatible with non-market communities in the NWT? Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Ward.
Thank you. We've had many discussions with many communities, probably at least 12 now, or if not more, and I get inquiries all the time about people who are like, come and build in my community. We have built in Detta, Hay River, and in Yellowknife, and that has all been in Detta and in Hay River was within the past 2 years. Prior to that, it was in Yellowknife. We're open to being able to build in other communities, but the way that the model works is that the house needs to be able to be resold so that that equity comes back to the homeowner.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. Just turning back to the down payment funding, the federal program, like the first-time home buyers tax credit, obviously is a tax credit, so you apply for it, it kicks in. I'm assuming banks don't have a problem with that. So is this an issue of the policy instrument we're using? Like if the GNWT offered a tax credit instead of a grant, does your expertise in this area think would that solve the problem with the banks not understanding how this works and not being able to accept it as a source of down payments? Ms. Ward.
Thank you. Potentially, and again, I'm not a mortgage expert, but that still doesn't solve the problem of that you're still paying interest over the life of the mortgage. So yes, you still may be able to make that down payment, but it doesn't resolve what if mortgage rates, interest rates then go up to 7% or 9% or what we saw back in the 80s, like 18%. Then that doesn't, because there's still that continued interest, it doesn't really solve that problem. But yes, potentially it may be something that could be looked at, but I couldn't provide a definitive answer on that, but it's something that may be able to be looked at. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. No, and I don't think you're a financial expert, but it's always good to kick these ideas around. Mr. Hawkins?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the presenter's information. I would just say on the onset, educating the bank may be an interesting undertaking, kind of like the mouse that roared. I'm not convinced in the context of how easy that would be, so I think your statement is well understated, unfortunately. I think the robust effort getting them around their policies on the adaptability of it may be more beneficial, but I am not a banking expert either, and I can appreciate the complexity built around their concerns of fraud and a whole bunch of other things. So it may not be fair, but it's also unfortunate. But you mentioned in your presentation under your policy and program recommendations, partnership with organizations such as Habitat. Maybe could you expand as to what that would look like, and are you able to be specific to what that could mean? It really helps policy proposers like ourselves on proposing to the government saying, we could change the narrative on, say, for example, X amount of families if we had done this adjustment in policy and hence got behind it. So how would you envision it specifically a partnership with organizations like Habitat to help us in, say, specifics? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ward.
Thank you. I noted that Habitat can often be more nimble than government departments can be. So we've had many discussions with communities about going into build. Habitat is also a very well-trusted organization and a very well-trusted brand. It's one of the most recognized organizations in Canada, if not the world. And the model has been shown to work. So I think by partnering in that, whether that be a continuation of the partnership with Housing NWT, where they have land availability in particular, and because land availability is one of the biggest issues that we're having right now. There is absolutely no residential land left in Yellowknife, and in other communities where there is land available, it's often very expensive to develop because that available residential land is not in a buildable condition, or it doesn't have zoning or anything like that. So I think those are areas where that partnership could be continued, is using the knowledge that the GNWT has about those zoning regulations and those contacts within communities, and obviously more continued stable funding to organizations that are doing home builds. We have a bit more flexibility in what we can do in terms, and relationships in terms of how we can build and who we can hire and that sort of thing. So we are able to be quite quick. We can put things like, have a lot blasted and a home put in and a family put in, in under 8 months. So that's a pretty quick timeline to be able to get people into housing pretty quickly. Thank you.
Mr. Hawkins.
Yeah, thank you very much. And it sounds terrible to say this, but for the record, MLAs have difficulty communicating the land tenureship issue to the department and its policymakers within. And so I share your frustration on that, because there's plenty of residential land potentially in all our municipalities that they need to find a way to let go and support the municipalities to do partner with you. You point out the targeted top-up fund for NWT home ownership program. Are you able to be a little more specific as to how you would define a northern carve-out? I have a vision of what that means, but maybe be helpful hearing what you define it as. And one more last thing, sorry, just going backwards. I appreciate the nimbleness of your, what do you say, 7 to 8 months? You almost sound like a private business. I mean, it's so nimble, you can just say, hey, we're going to do it, we do it. So congrats on that. But back to the targeted top-up fund. Could you define how you characterize a northern carve-out? There could be various definitions, but I want to hear what's helpful to you in your lexicon. Thank you.
Ms. Ward.
Specifically, northern carve-out in this instance refers to the $60 million that was dedicated through the CMHC Affordable Housing Fund. So we were able to access a portion of that northern carve-out funding, and then we also accessed additional funding through the main pot of the Affordable Housing Fund that was available to organizations across Canada. But the northern carve-out is specifically what dealt with the higher costs of building in the north, and that was something that was also provided. It was provided to the GNWT via CMHC, and we applied for that additional top up. So that is what that refers to. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee?
Hi, it's Jane here.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yes, I just wanted to ask here. I know that this is a really good program, and it's a lot of things that you said, and that as an MLA we've been talking about it to change within the system, and a lot of them, it seems like we had it here before through NWT housing program, no interest, no down payment, which is like housing assistance program. So, and then another one too is that, you identify social housing, rental housing, affordable, and market. All these we've been addressing, talking about, But there's one thing that eligibility criteria. I would like to know about that. Willingness to partner. There's 1, 2, 3, and then willingness to partner and build their own home. Is that similar to the home assistance program, the access program, where sweat equity, like housing from 20, 30 years ago? Did they introduce this program in the small communities where it's a mortgage program, but they got the homeowner to build their house, and as some of them were paying they were not, they were given, they were paying a minimal mortgage, not at 100%, where somebody like, okay, I had a similar program and I let them build my house for me, and so I paid 100%. So, but it's just that, is that the same program? That's just one of my questions. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ward.
I'm unsure if it's the same program, but it sounds like it has similar components. The willingness to partner criteria is, yes, that homeowners can earn 500 volunteer hours. It used to be called sweat equity in Habitat, but our lawyers made us change the term, but it's now just called volunteer. So homeowners contribute 500, and that can be on helping to build their own home. One thing, though, that we have noticed, we really had to pivot during COVID because no volunteers were allowed on site. And we're also, as we're moving towards more modular housing, because of its energy efficiency and because of its ease in getting it to the north and the affordability of modular housing, there are less opportunities for people to earn their volunteer hours building their own home. So we have added in components where they can earn those hours volunteering within the community. So, and that can look like a lot of different things depending on the community. We've had anything from, kids volunteering at the senior center, people working on clearing some of the landscaping around their home, and volunteering like at their kids' daycare sort of thing. So we've had to be a bit creative, but I'm not sure if it's the exact same program, but it definitely sounds like it might have some similar components. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. Ms. Whalen Armstrong.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yes, another one too is that I know that in small communities, and I think my colleague from other small communities had the same issues where, the unemployment rate is high in small communities. And but if and then some of the housing tenants currently, I know there's a lot of them want to be a homeowner. They want those old units that they've been living in for many years to, transfer to them. I know that there's a lot of them like that in my region. So I just want to ask if I know that you built some 10 houses, but nothing. I just want to know if there is any houses built in Clecho region, and is there a need to do one in the future? I just want to know if Habitat for Humanity are working with Clecho government or other, nonprofit organizations here in the Clecho region, maybe possibly build, because I know a lot of people have been inquiring about that, and a lot of them assume it was a free house, but it's not a free house. We know that. So I just want to know if they are working with other Indigenous organizations or Indigenous government. Thank you.
Ms. Ward.
So, yes, we've had many discussions with the Clecho government. At one time, probably, I believe it was about 3 years ago, our next build was going to take place in Bechico. At that time, the community decided that there had been some changes within the community and they weren't ready to facilitate a build at that time. So we then moved and worked with the Yellowknives Dene First Nation and did a build in Deda. So we have had several discussions with the Clicho, with various other Indigenous governments. We have found some interesting solutions to the land tenure in being, like, for example, in with the Yellowknives Dene First Nation, we got a permission to occupy, so that it allowed us to build there, and went through some different areas. So we definitely have some flexibility. The thing is, however, is that because our goal is always for equity to flow back to the homeowner. So in areas where it can be more difficult to sell a home, this can be challenging to ensure that that equity comes back to them, because if you can't sell your home, then obviously you're unable to keep that equity. That being said, however, we've had many discussions with different Indigenous governments. I know of at least 3 other Habitat affiliates across Canada that are actively doing builds with other Indigenous governments. The model may look slightly different in that, for example, the Habitat affiliate acts as the general contractor, but then the Indigenous government actually acquires the funding, and then they work with the affiliate to be the general contractor. Habitat builds that home, and then the management of that home and the selection of that family is then handed back to the Indigenous government. So there are and that works a little bit also. It's not necessarily home ownership, it's kind of more affordable housing and rental, depending on how the government wants to structure it. So all that to say, yes, we've had several discussions with the Clicho government. At this time, we're still open to it. We haven't really had a conversation. Probably last July we had a conversation and gave some briefing materials to Chief and Council. And since that time, we haven't had any more discussions, but are still open to doing a build in the Clicho region. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. Ms. Yakalaya was interested to know if you're doing any work in Enterprise. Obviously, they have a great need for affordable housing right now. And if you're not currently working there, can you work to assist the community in some regard? Ms. Ward.
So we've actually had many discussions about Enterprise with our board and with Housing NWT. As I continue to go back to, Enterprise is not for us, with the size of the affiliate and our budget, Enterprise is an area that you would not necessarily consider to be a market community. So again, there could be builds that happen there, but it's a very small scale. We are only building 1 to 2 homes a year, and while 1 to 2 homes in Enterprise would be very helpful, I think it needs to happen on a much larger scale than what Habitat is able to provide. And yeah, I'll go there. But Enterprise is an area that has been considered, but at this time it's not something that we're able to do at the scale that is needed in Enterprise. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. So you pointed out at the beginning of your presentation that you occupy the affordable housing space of the continuum. And of course, one of the big challenges in the Northwest Territories is we have a very limited continuum of options because we're just missing some of those steps. Can you speak to how we can do more in that space? Obviously, this is the work you're doing, but what else could we do to incentivize more affordable housing to create more options there? Is this like funding co-ops or creating grant programs or inviting other NGOs into the space or helping you? Can you give us some insight into what we can do in that space, Ms. Ward?
Thank you. That's a good question. It's a very big question, what one can do to support affordable housing. The NWT is doing quite a bit in the housing sphere. But obviously, I mean, the Northwest Territories has the 2nd lowest rate of home ownership in the entire country. Nunavut is the lowest. So I think it's important to look at that and say, like, why is the territory have such a low home ownership rate? Where there are other places in Canada that also have what you could consider non-market communities as well, but they still have higher levels of home ownership. So And again, just investing, as I mentioned, investing at all levels of the continuum. So there's a need to house people who are most vulnerable very quickly to ensure that they have a safe place to live. And that's where we come into places that are like shelters. We have so many people in the north that are experiencing hidden homelessness and living in unsafe conditions or in violent situations because there's just absolutely no other options in their communities. It is at a crisis level in Yellowknife, and it is at, I don't even know what you call beyond crisis, on fire levels in all of the other northern communities, as I'm sure you're aware. So most of our experience has been in Yellowknife because that's where we have done the majority of our builds. But we're seeing that there is that appetite there for people to own homes. So what we see is that when you, some people may have been living in social housing, some of our homeowners, then they are typically in rental housing. So everyone who has become a homeowner through Habitat was in rental housing. One thing may also be to look at rental regulations in the Northwest Territories. It really is quite mind-boggling to me the amount that landlords can continue to raise their rental prices without regulation. Like if you look at Nova Scotia, their rental cap, I believe, is set at 4%. And we're seeing that many of our people who have applied through our program simply have no other choice because they just got a notice from their landlord saying like, hey, your rent's going up 15%. Sucks to be you. And then there's no other options for where they can go. So that would be one suggestion in the rental sphere. Is having a look at ensuring that there are safety mechanisms in place for people who are in rental situations. Again, like partnering with organizations like Habitat, when you look at what our success rate has been, even over the past 3 years, because we got that major influx of funding through CMHC and through the affordable housing, through the Northern Carve-Out, it's really quite amazing what a small organization can do when they are able to get the proper access to the proper funding. All of the builds that we have done have been at or under budget. We've actually got a really great relationship with CMHC, with the local representative here, and they are amazed that we are able to build for the price that we are able to build at because of our relationships that we have with local builders and with people who are committed to the mission of Habitat. So I think that is where partnering with organizations like Habitat may differ in than the GNWT. Like nobody wants to give the GNWT a discount. But when you look at Habitat, like we have some amazing organizations and businesses who have donated their services for every single one of our builds. We have an electrician who has not charged for any of his services, and he's done all of our places in Yellowknife. So you just don't get that type of goodwill, I don't think, when you're doing it through a government program. So if you can partner with Habitat, people are still contributing to a strong mission, and they're still housing people who are in need.
Questions? Well, seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation today. This concludes today's public briefing on housing as a human right, and the public portion of our meeting is now concluded. Thank you.